Hello, it's Deepa from the Beaumont Library with your recommended read. Today I'll be reading an excerpt from The Boat People by Sharon Bala with permission by McClellan and Stewart. July 2009. Mahindan was flat on his back when the screaming began, one arm right-angled over his eyes. He heard the whistle and thud of falling artillery, the cries of the dying. Mortar shells and rockets, the whole world on fire. Then another sound. It cut through the clamor so that for a drawn-out second there was nothing else. Only him and his son, and the bomb that arched through the sky with a shrill banshee scream, spinning nose aim straight for them. Mahindan fought to open his eyes. His limbs were pinned down and heavy. He struggled to move, to call out in terror, to clamber and run. The ground rumbled. The shell exploded, shards of hot metal spinning in its wake. The tent was rent in half. Mahindan jolted awake. Heart like a sledgehammer, he sat up frantic, blinking into the darkness. He heard someone panting, and long seconds later realized it was him. The echoing whine of flying shrapnel faded, and he returned to the present, to the quarter mat under him, back to the hold of the ship. There were snores and snuffles, the small nocturnal noises of 500 slumbering bodies. Beneath him, the engine's monotonous whir. He reached out, instinctive, felt his son Celian curled up beside him, then lay down again. The back of his neck was damp. His pulse still raced. He smelled the sourness of his skin, the raw animal stink of the bodies all around. The man on the next mat slept with his mouth open. His snore was a revving motorcycle, so close to Mahindan he could almost feel the warm exhales. He put his hand against Celian's back, felt it move up and down. Gradually, his own breathing slowed to the same rhythm. He ran a hand through his son's hair, fine and silky, the soft strands of a child, then stroked his arm, felt the roughness of his skin, the long, thin scratches, the scabbed-over insect bites. Celian was slight, 6 years old and barely 3 feet tall. How little space the child occupied, coiled into himself, his thumb in his mouth. How precarious his existence, how miraculous his survival. Mahindan's vision adjusted, and shapes emerged out of the gloom. The thin rails on either side of the ladder. Lamps strung up along an electrical cord. Outside the porthole window, it was still pitch black. Careful not to wake Celian, he stood and gingerly made his way across the width of the ship toward the ladder, stepping between bodies huddled on thin mats and ducking under sleepers swaying overhead, cocooned in rope hammocks. It was hot and close, the atmosphere suffocating. Hema's thick plate trailed out on the dirty floor. Mahindan stooped to pick it up and laid it gently on her back as he passed by. Her 2 daughters shared the mat beside her. They lay on their sides facing each other, knees and foreheads touching. A few feet on, he passed the man with the amputated leg and averted his gaze. During the day, the ship was rowdy with voices, but now he heard only the slap of the electrical cord against the wall, everyone breathing in and out, recycling the same stale diesel-scented air. A boy cried out in his sleep, caught in a nightmare. And when Mahindan turned toward the sound, he saw Kumaran's wife comfort her son. With both hands grasping the banisters, Mahindan hoisted himself up the ladder. Emerging onto the deck, inhaling the fresh scent of salt and sea, he felt immediately lighter. From overhead, the mast creaked, and he gazed up to see the stars, the half-Upham moon glowing alive in the sky. At the thought of Upham, doughy hot off the fire, his stomach gave a plaintive, hollow grumble. It was dark, but he knew his way around the ship. A dozen plastic buckets were lined up along the stern. He squatted in front of one and formed his hands into a bowl. The water was tepid, murky with twigs and bits of seaweed. He splashed water on his face and the back of his neck, feeling the grit scratch his skin. The boat, a 60-meter freighter, past its prime and jerry-rigged for 500 passengers, was cruising through calm waters, groaning under the weight of too much human cargo. Mahindan held on to the railing, rubbing a thumb against the blistered rust. A few others were out, shadowy figures keeping silent vigil on both levels of the deck. They had been at sea for weeks or months, sunrises blurring into sunsets. Days spent on deck, tarps draped overhead to block out the sun, and the floor burning beneath them. Stormy nights when the ship would lurch and reel, Sellian cradled in Mahindan's lap, their stomachs tumbling with the pitch and yaw of the angry ocean. But the captain had said they were close, and for days they had been expecting land, a man posted at all times in the crow's nest. Mahindan turned his back to the railing and slid down to sit on the deck. Exhaustion whenever he thought of the future, terror when he remembered the past. He yawned and pressed a cheek to raised knees, then tucked his arms in for warmth. At least here on the boat they were safe from attack. Riksala, Prem, Chitra's mother and father, the roll call of the dead lulled him to sleep. And that was an excerpt from The Boat People. I hope you check it out.